Welcome to the latest edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside Sam Quinn from CBS Sports.com. Just wrapped up Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and it was the Knicks who mount a massive comeback this time, Sam. They ended up beating the Pacers 106-100. They were down 20 overall in the game. They were down 10 going into the fourth quarter, but yet another comeback, yet another road team, yet another game where the home team can't win on their own floor. This has been a fantastic series, and we got another good one.
Yeah, I thought the series was drunk after game one. Now we're up to like angel dust. I don't know. What's happening? Right? I remember like the 2-minute mark of the second quarter when Halliburton threw the alley-oop to Toppin. It felt like a funeral for the Knicks, which is kind of a crazy thought to put out there when just last round they had two 20-point comebacks in Boston. Something felt very different about this. I think just given the way they lost game one and game two, how good the Pacers looked, it felt like the Knicks were well and truly dead. And then all of a sudden, like DeLon Wright is in here making the defensive plays of his life. Karl Towns, 20 points in the fourth quarter. Like, I can't believe what I just watched.
Yeah, this has been a wacky series. We're through 3 games, and the Pacers and the Knicks are separated by 2 points in the aggregate. Pacers are up by 2 points. So much to get to here in this game, Sam. I guess we'll start with the fourth quarter, just because the fourth quarter comeback was really pretty remarkable. As you mentioned, Karl-Anthony Towns went crazy in the fourth quarter. He had 4 points total in the first 3 quarters. He finished with 24 points and 15 rebounds. This is a guy who spent a big portion of crunch time in game 2 on the bench. And all of a sudden they go back to him, and they go back to him, Sam, at a time when Jalen Brunson, who was in foul trouble for much of the second half, he picked up his 5th foul in the fourth quarter. Tibbs didn't go back to him in the fourth quarter until a minute and a half left in the game. So Jalen Brunson was on the shelf for much of the fourth quarter, and it was Karl-Anthony Towns playing great, and Josh Hart, who didn't do a lot offensively, but just had so many huge rebounds, and then also made some really clutch free throws as well. I just wanted to flag, too, that not only did the Knicks mount a massive comeback, again, this is their third 20-point comeback of these playoffs, but at that point where you and I and everybody else thought it was going to be Pacers 3-0 and we've got the funeral for the Knicks, you tweeted out, "This looks like the kind of game where the Knicks trade Karl-Anthony Towns for Kevin Durant." And then Karl-Anthony Towns, I guess, saw your tweet mid-game and just decided to put it right in your face.
That had to be what happened. That's the only explanation. I mean, I'm looking at this on the other side where I'm a New Yorker and you're welcome, city, for reverse jinxing that into existence. Is that the most significant quarter game of Karl-Anthony Towns' career, right? Because like the book on him, I think at least going into last year, was that this was somebody who in the playoffs just didn't play well. The shooting disappeared. He fouled too much. The turnovers, blah, blah, blah. And he has that series against Denver where it kind of starts to shift, but that was more of a bigger like team identity thing. And he doesn't play well against Dallas in games 1 through 3. And that like is quietly one of the big reasons they lost that series. And then he gets benched in game 2, and you find yourself thinking like, oh man, have the Knicks made a big mistake investing in this guy? And he flat saved the season. He was so good in that fourth quarter. Like, John, did you have the thought that I did that they might just not bring Jalen Brunson back into the game?
Well, yeah, but then I thought, no, that's ridiculous. Like they couldn't possibly do that. We got a shot chart up here for everybody checking us out on YouTube right now. This is Karl-Anthony Towns' fourth quarter shot chart where he had 67%. He was 6 of 9 from the field in the fourth quarter. He looked fantastic. And you're right, Sam. There were moments. I mean, what a weird season, an up and down season for Cat, because there was a moment, big moments where Bill and I were talking about how well Cat was playing and how I was like, I don't know who the 5th guy in the MVP voting is going to be. Do we at least need to discuss Karl-Anthony Towns because he was playing so well? And Bill was like, that's crazy. He's not even the best player on his own team. And I was like, okay, that's really like hard to argue with logic. And then he slipped down the rankings for me a little bit, does make all NBA. And then there was a point in obviously this series where they decided to go away from him. And we need to discuss like Tibbs deciding to alter the starting lineup. On the merits, it probably should have been Cat that came out of the starting lineup, but they decided to put Josh Hart onto the bench instead. But man, you're right. He really did save the season, because if they lose this game, it is an absolute wrap. It's still going to be difficult for them to climb back in. Teams that lose the first 2 games at home in the playoffs are 40-5, and that includes the Celtics, who lost to the Knicks in the previous round. So the Knicks know what they're up against still, but they have to be feeling really good about this. And then on the other side, if you're there's been so many moments in the series where you're like, oh, that team has to be kicking themselves. The Pacers have to absolutely be kicking themselves here.
I mean, the Knicks kind of felt the same way in game 1, right? Does that kind of tell us that maybe these teams are just pretty even, and we're going to get to the end of most of these games and they're both going to have a chance? And like, if either team lets up for even a little bit, the other team's going to get back into it. Now, they still have home court advantage, but the difference is the Knicks only have to win one more time in Indiana now as opposed to 2. So you don't feel quite as good about that. And then the other thing that, like, quietly is pretty significant here, Aaron Nesmith tweaks his ankle in I think it was the 3rd quarter, and that's part of what sparked that run for the Knicks. He came back, but, like, is he going to be at 100% going into game 4? Because obviously he swings game 1. He's great in game 2. He is so important defensively, especially against Brunson, because he's so good at denying screens. And if you can deny screens against Jalen Brunson, you can take away not everything that he does, but we saw this was by far his worst game in the series.
Yeah, I thought he looked okay when he came back. At one, I thought it was encouraging that Nesmith came back at all, because when he tweaked his ankle, it looked pretty bad. And then for him to come back, and also I thought he looked okay moving. So that was the big thing. Now, whether or not it swells up on him, tightens up on him, we'll see whether or not that happens going into game 4, if he can just ice it and be okay on that. What did you think about that 4th quarter where the Pacers, I thought their offense really dried up? The Knicks, obviously, 2 things are true at the same time here. The Knicks played probably their best defense in the 4th quarter that they've played in this series, but also offensively, I thought it was a lot of Halliburton and Siakam and everybody else just looking around going, uh-oh, who's going to score the ball here? There was multiple times when Halliburton drove the lane and decided to kick it out or dribble it out. And part of that was Mitchell Robinson was in the paint. Okay, I get it. But also, like, there were several times when I was like, oh, you had a step there, you can get to the bucket, and you decided not to. And it just felt like nobody wanted the shot for Indiana, which was very strange to me.
Well, I think they're a team that really relies on rhythm, right? They're so good when they're, like, generating turnovers and playing with pace, like when the other team is missing shots and you can really run. I think being up as much as they were, it kind of slowed them down a little bit, and they never quite recaptured the general, like, controlled chaos that they play with. And then also, like, Deuce McBride and DeLon Wright were so good on defense, especially like early in that 4th quarter. I thought that made a huge difference. Like, with DeLon Wright not being in the rotation for the entire playoffs, and it's not just the energy, that's the really visible thing. If you go back and watch DeLon Wright's minutes, he's like directing traffic on defense. He's calling out switches. He's like controlling the scheme like a center would on the back line. And, like, that's not something you should be able to do when you're not in the rotation.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten some to spend some time, or at least talking to DeLon Wright, and he's a really smart guy, so that doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me is that all of a sudden Tibbs, should we do the Tibbs conversation now?
Oh, I was ready to fire him after game 2. I'm ready to, like, give him a 5-year extension today.
Okay, let's talk about not only Tibbs, but principal Knicks motivator Sam Quinn, because not only did Sam Quinn light a fire under Karl Anthony Towns and motivate him to have one of his best games of the postseason, or maybe even his career. That 4th quarter was spectacular. But Sam Quinn, and rightly so, after the second game, wrote a piece for CBSSports.com that I and everybody else that follows basketball, watches basketball, talks about basketball was like, yeah, I mean, he's right about this. So the starting lineup for the Knicks coming into tonight's game, we had a sample size of 308 minutes. They were a minus 50. Everybody from you and me to the people I worked with at SI to the Ringer, whatever, were like, they've got to change this up. This is a big sample size. They're getting run off the floor here. Why aren't they going to make any moves? And we thought, okay, well, maybe Tibbs finally will make a move, although he's very stubborn. And he did tonight. He made a move. He changed the starting lineup. Josh Hart went to the bench, and in comes Mitchell Robinson. And I was a little surprised about that, because frankly, if we're looking at the lineups that were really working, it was kind of like take Cat off the floor and put him on the bench, but I guess they were never going to do that. First, let's just start there. Were you surprised that Tibbs made the move at all?
A little bit, just because it's so, like, the opposite of the way he normally operates, right? Like, They had that Knicks starting lineup was the most used lineup in the NBA all season. Tibbs has had a few starting lineups throughout his time as a head coach be the most used lineup in the NBA. He always has 2 or 3 of the 10 most used players in the NBA. That's just what his identity is. But it's kind of ironic, right? Like, I think back to, I remember Riverboat Ron in the NFL, Ron Rivera, where he goes from like overnight, the coach who never goes for it on fourth down, to the coach that suddenly goes for it on every fourth down. It felt a little bit like that when he puts in Shamet and DeLon Wright. Like, it felt like he had sort of a come to Jesus moment before this game where he's like, I've got to be willing to try new stuff. I was a little surprised that it was Mitch as opposed to Deuce, because I think Deuce McBride's ball pressure was so important against this Indiana offense that has all of these ball handlers. I thought it was a little bit of a risk to put in Mitch, but I understood it under the logic that in game 2, Mitch had to play like 16 consecutive minutes in the first half, which he was clearly gassed at the end of that. But if you're not starting him and you're trying to get him to a big minutes total, then it becomes really difficult to like actually get him the minutes that he needs if he's sitting out the first 6 or 7 minutes of each half. So it made sense. And I don't know that lineup in particular was all that effective. They were trailing for most of the first half.
Yeah.
But I do think they needed the shakeup. And I think Hart's energy going up against the bench made a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, Hart's origins are from the bench, right? Last year, he and Dante DiVincenzo were pressed into starter duty because of all the injuries, and I'm with you. His energy really boosted that second unit. We're going to take a quick break. First, I just want to thank everybody who's joining us live on YouTube, including brother BKL from the Bronx. Congrats on your Knicks win. Want to encourage everybody to hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, click on that bell symbol. You'll get notified when we go live. Sam and I are doing a lot of live shows during this postseason. We'll probably be back on Tuesday and Wednesday night as well. Quick timeout. On the other side, more about Tibbs, more about the Knicks getting their first win of this series, climbing back into it, winning game 3, and putting the Pacers on notice that this is not over yet. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. This is Beyond the Arc.
UEFA Conference League Final on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount+.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. Knicks win game 3, 106-100 at Indiana. Pacers still up 2-1 in the series, but as we mentioned, it's just so close. The series has been so good as opposed to the Western Conference, where we've gotten some virtuoso performances from each of those teams, just not at the same time. All 3 games have been duds, as opposed to here in the Eastern Conference. It's 2-1 lead for the Pacers, but they're up just 2 points in the aggregate, and all 3 games have been absolute bangers, have gone down to the wire. I want to continue the Tibbs conversation, Sam. I'm surprised, frankly, that Tibbs made the switch. Credit to Tibbs. Sometimes, Sam, it's not even about whether or not that lineup worked and he decided to run double big with Mitchell Robinson and Cat. It's about just like, okay, we know that this starting unit, that even though he decided to close with them for a little bit there in the fourth quarter, they know that starting unit was getting run off the floor. You have to try just something else to change the momentum a little bit, up to and including the fact that for once he actually played his bench a little bit. They still got outscored 25-17 by the second unit for the Pacers. But you mentioned this. DeLon Wright got some minutes and Shamet got some minutes. And it wasn't just Hart who was now on the bench and Deuce McBride, who was always good off the bench for them, or at least, a good change of pace. Tibbs changing his ways here. Who would have thought among us?
Well, desperation is the mother of invention, right? Or necessity is the mother of invention. Like, that's what losing 2 home games at the start of the Eastern Conference Finals will do to you.
How much do you think that his assistant coaches had to shake him and be like, Tibbs, it's now or never?
Yeah, I think there had to be some sort of intervention after game 2, because that was, I think the moment that really like sold this to me is like, there's something wrong here. I think it was the first like 3.5 minutes of the third quarter of game 2, where the Knicks were up 3, and the first time out of that third quarter, they're now down 2, and you find yourself thinking like, okay, like they've done it with the starters. They're not going to bring the starters back after this timeout. And they did. And it was like 3.5 more minutes. And you're just pulling your hair out going like, everybody can see this isn't working. So I don't know that double big is what I would stick with as a start. Like, you're going into game 4. I'm not going back to the old starters. That ship is dead. Are you starting Mitch? Are you starting Deuce? What are you thinking?
Probably Deuce. I'm with you on that. I don't know that I'm going to go double big. What did you think about? Okay, so he arrives at the correct conclusion, right? However, begrudgingly, I don't know if Rick Brunson had to take him out back and smack him around a little bit or what happened, but he finally decides I'm going to switch up the starting lineup because we've got enough of a sample size here to know that it's not working. But then in the fourth quarter, he goes to close with it again. And then the only reason that they didn't end up closing like the last 7 minutes or whatever is because Jalen Brunson picked up his fifth foul and he couldn't bring him back in until a minute and a half left. When I saw that, I was like, what's happening here?
Well, I found myself thinking when they brought Brunson back in and they put him in for McBride, I found myself kind of thinking maybe it should be for Bridges instead. Like, if you look at the lineup data throughout the playoffs, it's like 9 of the top 10 lineups all feature Deuce McBride. So I was a little confused by that as well. Now it ends up working out. I think there was an element of feel to that more than anything. I think like there was a part of me thinking as Cat was going nuclear, like, do they just stick with the defense plus Cat and have Cat try to carry them home? I mean, now in hindsight, of course, it makes sense that they didn't. And Brunson got them both that one bucket with like a minute left.
Yeah.
And then those 2 free throws that sealed the game.
Were huge.
So, of course, they weren't going to close without Brunson, but I don't know exactly what the lineup combinations are here. I think there was some encouraging stuff from this game, but I don't go into game 4 feeling like I know exactly what the rotation is going to be. I'm happy to go back to that Wright Shamet lineup, which, by the way, sort of felt like an accident because McBride gets the 3 fouls in the first quarter. It feels like they just sort of struck gold accidentally. Now, that being said, Rick Carlisle is going to go watch that tape and figure out how exactly can I run pick and roll at Landry Shamet every time down the court if he's going to be out there. So I don't know if we're going to get 11 more Shamet minutes. I think Delon Wright has certainly earned a place in this rotation. Could we see Precious Achiuwa, by the way?
Yeah.
When they started Mitch, like, I think the thought process to that defensively was that we're now going to put Towns on Siakam because OG wasn't working in that matchup. And you're probably going to lose that matchup, but like Karl Anthony Towns defended Kevin Durant for a series last year. Did it go especially well? Maybe not by the numbers, but did Minnesota win that series? Yeah, they swept it. So the thought there kind of felt like now we can take OG off of Siakam and use him more to create ball pressure. Is that something that you maybe try to replicate, but do it, say, with some Precious Achiuwa minutes in there instead of those Shamet minutes? Like, just anything you can do to get OG off of Siakam so he can defend the guards.
I'm glad you brought up Precious, free Precious. I don't understand why Tibbs doesn't use him. He's a useful NBA basketball player. I don't get it. About Tibbs. So they win this game. If they hadn't won this game, everybody would be talking about Tibbs' job watch, even though you get to the first Eastern Conference Finals in 25 years. Where are you on Tibbs and like his job security? You know, had they lost, it would have obviously been started in earnest. But if they lose this series after, I thought he got outcoached, flat out outcoached in the first 2 games. And I'm still not crazy about how he used his challenges tonight. Sometimes there's somebody on every NBA bench who's supposed to be in charge of challenges. And I don't know who that person is, or if like Tibbs is overruling them, or like how those decisions are getting made. But so many times I'm like, why are they doing this challenge?
Well, anyway, maybe that's what Precious is doing if he's not going to play, right?
Where are you on Tibbs?
I do want to check the challenge stats too, because it feels like Carlisle is 6 for 6 and Tibbs is 0 for 3. Like, I think mathematically it's about as far as it can be. I'm of 2 minds here. I don't think Tibbs has done a good job in this series up until game 3. It's not just the lineups, right? Think about all the open shots Indiana got in those 2 games in New York. Tibbs, you're supposed to be like this defensive guru, and they're just absolutely torching you, right? The offense, look, the Knicks won the game tonight. They scored 106 points against the team that's not known for its defense. I think Indiana's defense is better than it gets credit for, but I don't feel like they found an offensive scheme that works so much as Cat just had the best quarter of his life. And so much of that offense is just Jalen dribble, go in, try to get fouled. I don't know that what happened tonight outside of the magic rotation touch was great coaching. Now, that being said, is there really a great coach out there to replace him? I have some ideas. I'll throw out some names.
I mean,
I
Mike
guess
Malone.
Malone is the obvious one. I don't know that Malone is that much better. He has a lot of similar tendencies as far as really leaning on his starters. I don't think he's especially offensively creative. I think that was much more a function of David Adelman and Jokic, obviously, in Denver. Like, I don't think Mike Malone is that different.
I was going to say, like, generally when you change a coach, you try to change not only style, but also personality traits. And like, they are very similar human beings.
Well, you know if you want to go that route, the opposite, the literal opposite does exist. It's Mike Budenholzer, who is going to play his starter 32 minutes, who's going to pluck all of the low-hanging fruit with shot selection and defense and that stuff. But you're going to lose that identity of grit and toughness that they've had for the last, several years, however long Tibbs has been there. I feel bad having this conversation after, I don't know if this is the biggest win of the season because game 2 against Boston was so transformative, but like after a really, really huge win, but I don't feel like Tibbs has coached an especially good series. I'm not going into game 4 thinking the Knicks have figured it out. They found it in this game and the series is going to be different. What I'm mostly thinking is, Indiana did not shoot very well. They were 5 of 25. And the Knicks,
from 5 of 25 from deep was not good.
Yeah, and the Knicks struck gold with a couple of reserves that, let's face it, Indiana did not game plan for, right? They're going to be ready for Wright and Shamet in game 4.
Well, I think credit where it's due too. The Knicks didn't shoot well from the line in the first 2 games, and in the playoffs, that's been, like an intermittent problem for them. And tonight they hit 90% on 30 free throws. So they when it mattered, they hit those free throws. So that was important. Let's just discuss, because you've mentioned something there about like how you don't feel great about the offense because they only scored 106 points against the Pacers. The Pacers only scored 100 points at home. It is the playoffs, Sam. Right. And the playoffs, it gets a little tighter. Shots get a little bit harder to create. As I mentioned on the Pacers side, Tyrese Halliburton, I thought passed up a couple looks. They flagged this on the broadcast tonight. SVG did, where he said, for whatever reason, Halliburton has frequently played better on the road than he does in his own building. I almost said barn because I've been watching Shoresy. I don't know if you've seen Shoresy on Hulu, but hilarious show, and I highly recommend everybody check it out. But yeah, he hasn't played as well in his home arena. So of those 2 offenses, who do you feel better about / who do you feel worse about?
Yeah, I think the Pacers are fine. I think this was just a blip for them. The Knicks have played offense the same way throughout really the whole playoffs, right? Like all of the concerns that we've had where they never quite developed the Brunson-Cat pick and roll in the way that we wanted. Well, case in point, Cat had the quarter of his life with Brunson mostly on the bench, right? They still have the spacing issues that come with playing Josh Hart a fair bit. They can win the rebounding battle, but mostly when they go double big. They can't really defend when they have both Brunson and Cat on the floor. And like, I know they didn't have to have them on the floor together as much tonight. Realistically, they're going to play a ton of minutes together in game 4. And the Pacers have switch hunted him so dramatically, right? Like Halliburton coming into this game, Halliburton has been so aggressive with switch hunting that if you look at the tracking data, the top 3 defenders against whom he's taken the most shots in this playoffs have all been bigs. It's Bobby Portis in round 1. I think it's Jared Allen in round 2. It might have been Mobley, but I think it was Jared Allen. And then it was Towns in round 3. And I think he's like probably now up to like 19, 20 shots against Towns in this series. Like the Pacers have these easy sources of offense, these easy ways to switch hunt that I don't know that the Knicks do, right? Like Brunson being incredible is a source of offense, but I don't know that that's a source of offense that leads to overall team success because there's just so much standing still and dribbling involved in it.
Yeah, producer Aaron points out that the Knicks drop coverage simply won't work. I think he's probably right on that on the whole, although you got to make them pay. Tonight, just 5 for 25 from deep, and okay, I'm with you in general on paper that the Pacers should be fine, and this is a blip because, fast break points tonight were good. They weren't getting their 3-point shot to fall. But again, in the fourth quarter, part of it was the Knicks defense really ratcheted up, and part of it was, again, yes, they are greater than the sum of their parts, right? That when they're in a flow, when they're in a rhythm, when the ball is moving, they're really good at setting each other up. They get offense out of unit creation. But I did not oh no, things are getting tight, and the wheels came off of the offense, and it ground to an absolute halt tonight. And that's just something like that's a little bit concerning for me, where, Tyrese Halliburton has been great, coming off an all-time playoff career high by Siakam, and neither of those guys were anywhere to be found late in that game. Like, not great for me. I want to thank everybody, by the way, for joining us live on YouTube. Hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and of course, hit the bell symbol. You'll get notified when we go live. Sam and I are doing a whole bunch of live shows. Those are my concerns for the Pacers, Sam.
Yeah, I think the Pacers kind of have that like beautiful game offense where you think about like San Antonio, Golden State, the teams like that, where it's not like the traditional pick and roll game. And like, I'm not necessarily in one camp or the other of whether or not that works in the playoffs or doesn't. I will say a lot of people think that it does. Like Kevin Durant himself has said that beautiful game motion stuff works great in the first 2 rounds, but when you get to the conference finals and the finals, it really just helps to have a bucket on your team.
Sure.
Where that's kind of the entire Knicks philosophy, right? Where like they do none of that stuff. They never pass. It's all just Brunson trying to get up his few shots and Cat doing his thing tonight. Like, these are diametrically opposed offenses, and that almost makes it like a battle for basketball's soul in this series, where it's like, which side is going to work? It reminds me a little bit of those Houston Golden State series, where it's like, this is basketball being played at the absolute highest level, and all it really is one side switch hunting, and the other side desperately trying to get motion working and failing. It's just, I don't know that either side is right. I think in a perfect world, you kind of need a little bit of both. And if Halliburton can't get the 30, if Siakam can't get the 30, look, McConnell has his stretches of like 6 minutes, and Nembhard has his stretches of like 6 to 12 minutes. Somebody has to be the guy who steps in and says like, okay, the Stars don't have it. Tonight's going to be a 25-point night.
This has been such a fantastic series. I really thought that the Knicks were cooked, and then they came back, and it's their third 20-point comeback in the last 2 rounds. They've been fantastic. The Pacers have been fantastic. This series has been fantastic. Again, through 3 games, they are separated by just 2 points. We'll see what happens in the Western Conference Finals tomorrow night, but man, I cannot get enough of the Eastern Conference Finals. So hopefully Sam and I will be back after game 4 of the Eastern Conference Finals on Tuesday night. You can come and join us live on YouTube at Beyond the Arc CBS on YouTube. But for now, I think that's going to do it for us. Knicks take game 3. They win 106-100. Pacers are up 2-1 in the series, but we got a series, Sam. It's been really good. For now, for Sam Quinn from CBSSports.com, I'm John Gonzalez. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.